Hey everyone, and welcome to another Synced Up Equipment Basics video. My name is Kyle, and in this one we're going to be continuing our tossing technique ideas into Sabre and going over how to do our double all the way through our 7. Do me a favor real quick and hit that like button down below as well as that subscribe button so you can join our community on here. And if you want to stay up to date with our series as well as any other content we may post in the future, go ahead and hit that bell icon as well. Anyways, let's get into learning how to throw our saber. So when it comes to throwing a saber, the approach technically is going to be fairly similar to the one that we have for a rifle. We're still going to be utilizing that push hand, we're still going to be finding a release point, and we're still going to be catching flat at our waist, starting in that left flat and ending in the right flat. There are a couple differences, however, that we have seen already in the past in terms of the angle that the equipment is on when we release, timing, and different things like that. So we'll make sure to review over the specifics that are similar to rifle and then also cover in more detail the differences that we see on saber. We're going to first go over our doubles, triples, and quads, and then we'll talk about our 5s, 6s, and 7s. I just won't be able to demonstrate it because, again, my ceiling is only so high. So first thing I want to cover is going to be our dip. The difference between rifle and saber is that when you go to throw saber tosses above a single, you are always going to do a quarter dip. There will never be a point where you go to a full dip to throw a toss on saber. No one does it. You don't need the extra full dip. This is a much lighter piece of equipment and takes a lot more finesse as opposed to brute strength. So every toss that we do is going to be a quarter dip. The only difference was that singles came out from flat. Everything else will be from the quarter. To do a quarter dip, we talked about on rifle how we had some space between our palm and the equipment. Same thing applies on saber. I'm pressing my thumbs against the back of my equipment, and when I go to dip, I'm going to pull that right hand up to my angle, pressing my palm against the back of the blade and still keeping that thumb against the back there as well. My left hand stayed in my spin dot and it allowed for rotation, but it still is engaging in this dip position. Reminder to be careful not to allow that shoulder to dip down, and also be careful not to let this elbow rise up super high. We want to keep it nice and low, thinking about keeping the wrist neutral in that dip position. From there, we're ready to go into the techniques that we need to apply for the actual release. So before we go into the specifics of each individual toss in terms of release points and things like that, I want to go over and just remind us some of the things that are going to be consistent between rifle and saber. When we talked about going into a release, we first talked about initiating the release with the push, leading with that tip of the blade in this case, and not just pulling up that left hand, because then we have that drooping effect in the saber and the weight of the blade is going to slow it down. So we want to lead with that tip. We are going to be releasing at flat, which is a little bit different. We're not going up to the angle. Releasing at flat to make sure that it stays on the left side of our body and we catch in the center of our body on that catch position. We push to release. We flick at the top to let the saber spin in the air. We're going to be basing it off of the tip this time. So the tip will go up once on the release, and then it'll go up for the amount of times that you are rotating. So if I'm throwing a double, it's going to go up 3 times. If I throw a triple, it'll go up 4 times. So just a couple things to remember in terms of consistency between the two pieces of equipment. Those things will remain the same. And then as I go through each of the tosses, I'll talk about the differences that we see with that. So when it comes to a double, your release point is going to be the exact same on rifle. You're going to start in that quarter dip with your left hand at the spin dot. I'm going to push to find my release, and I'm going to pull up to where my wrist is in line with my chest. But this time again, I am releasing at a flat position. My saber tip will go up once, again one more time in the air, and then one last time before I go into my catch at right flat. So I go dip, push, and squeeze, and there's my double right there. When it comes to a triple, I'm going to take that release point up to where my wrist is in line with my shoulder. Again, same as rifle. So I go push, I find my release point, the tip will stop at flat when I let go of the saber. I'll see it go up 4 times before I go in for my catch. So we go dip and up and squeeze, finding that triple. One more time just so you can see that right there, finding that triple. For the quad, we are doing the exact same thing as we did on rifle. We're gonna take that release point and take it up to where the forearm is in line with the shoulder, making sure we are just adding a little bit more of a push with the right hand. Reminder that the distance between your spin dot up into the release point increases, but the time to get from point A to point B stays the same. So that increase in speed to get you to those destinations is what's gonna allow you to have an increase in your rotation and your height. So for our quad, we find our release at that forearm in line with the shoulder. Dip to go up, and then squeeze. One more time, up, squeeze right there. Finding that flat at our waist, spreading our hands apart, and really try your best to keep the saber on the left side of your body, so when you catch, you can spread your hands apart a little bit easier, and you can reach for that catch tape. Now, just to briefly go over our 5s, 6s, and 7s, it's going to be the same as on rifle. Again, I'm not able to demonstrate it, but I will talk about those release points. We just ended with our quad being center of forearm in line with our shoulder. Our 5 is going to be elbow in line with shoulder. 6 is going to be elbow in line with mouth. And then 7 is going to be elbow in line with forehead. So it's really convenient that the release points for both rifle and saber are the same. And the only thing that you have to think of as different is going to be that release at flat as opposed to letting go at the angle to make sure that it stays on the left side of your body. So quick review of all the release points. Our single is going to be at our spin dot, double will be at our chest, triple will be wrist in line with shoulder, quad is forearm in line with shoulder, 5 is elbow in line with shoulder, creating that right angle with the arm. 6 is elbow in line with mouth, and then 7 is going to be elbow in line with forehead, and that'll be all of our release points for our double through our 7. So one thing I want to talk about is going to be detail in terms of how you catch a saber, and more specifically where the blade lands in your hand. There is a preferred way to do this that's not going to hurt as much, especially because this is a piece of metal. Your goal is to catch at the catch tape of the saber, but you also want that blade to land in the center of your palm at this diagonal where the meatier palm part of your palm is. Or if you're wearing a pair of gloves, you'll see that there's like a piece of padding at a diagonal in the center of your palm. That's where you want your hand to land. If you catch this more in your fingertips, that's going to be really uncomfortable just because, again, metal on joints or metal on really just bone. But if you catch more in that meaty part of your palm, 1, you'll have a stronger catch, but 2, it'll cushion that catch a little bit more in your hand. So just aim for that. Think about reaching those fingertips underneath a little bit more as opposed to pulling them back, so that way you can really place that that blade in the center of your palm. Now, real quick, I just want to do a couple of reminders of some things that you need to be watching out for as you are attempting to throw your toss. The first one is going to be your shoulders. I mentioned this a second ago, but you want to make sure that as you go in for your dip, you don't allow the shoulder to drop down. When you go to the release, especially when it's a higher release, so you're not lifting that shoulder too high. And then when you go in for the catch, that you're not allowing your body to react to the catch. Instead, thinking about pulling your saber apart and really lifting that chest open so that way you can present it and keep the shoulders stacked. The next thing I want you to think about is same as rifle. You want to make sure that you are not leading with the hilt by pulling the left hand up and not utilizing your right hand. You initiate the toss through the push. Even with saber, even though that this is a thinner piece of equipment, you do want to push it. You are letting go at that flat, so it has to be a bit quicker to get up to your release point, but you don't want to pull with the left hand because then we see what happens with the energy of the equipment. The blade will pull it back down. So just be very aware of that as you are going through. The next thing I want you to think about is same as rifle, saber will also have peak counts. There'll be a moment where it suspends in the air for a quick second before it starts to descend back into the catch. So when you are practicing this, practice this with multiple tempos so you are able to utilize that and see the difference between your peak counts and how that fluctuates in terms of a count structure between different tempos. It also really helps you to subdivide the toss and make sure that you know exactly when your hands should be going in. You should not be lifting your hands up prior to the peak, realistically. Once it starts to come back down, that's when you can start to anticipate that catch. Reminder though, that when we are doing the catch, same thing we talked about in the singles video, we want to avoid the W arms, yeah? So make sure that you're keeping that free arm that you pushed with down all the way through until the catch so you can counteract the motion of that catch position. And then lastly, I want to remind you about stacking your arm. Remember that we don't want to travel our pathway to the release point out and around because it's going to take us a lot more time to get through that, and we lose a lot of momentum when we do it. So we want to stack that elbow underneath the arm and take a straight line path through that elevator up to our release point, allowing that elbow to support the wrist on that release. Awesome, so it was a pretty short video today, but this one is very similar to what we have already discussed in terms of rifle, so it's really just a lot of reminders with the slight differences with this piece of equipment. But to review everything we went over, we talked about how to do left-handed tosses on saber, otherwise known as hilt tosses. We talked about the difference in the dip, saying that sabers are always going to be quarter dip for every single toss. We do not do a full dip at all on saber. And then we went into the specifics of each of the tosses, the release points for our double all the way through to our 6, and then also talked about the components of the push and everything that's very similar to what we already have discussed on rifle. Once we finished with that, we did review over some things we discussed that were a little bit minute details in terms of tossing, so ideas such as our shoulder alignment, stacking our arm underneath, the peak counts and other things like that, making sure that we're staying very consistent with the approach to our toss and utilizing the technique to our advantage. And there is our video on how to do saber hilt tosses. If you found this video helpful in any way, shape, or form, please consider liking. And as always, if you have any questions, go down to that comment section and we'll be there to help you guys out. Anyways, I'll see you guys on the next one, and stay safe while you're spinning.